would say the first is to understand your current strategy really well. What is it that's allowed you to compete effectively? What is your core business really about? What is truly core to your business? How do you differentiate? And I think this pillar number one is finding ways to leverage digital and data-driven capabilities to enhance that core, actually. I think that that's really important, not to just assume that you need to change everything about yourself just because you face a new threat or a new competitor, that really, starting with what is it about your core business that's made it great? How do you actually use digital and data-driven innovation to enhance that? I think that's number one. I think, number two is leadership. And I think leadership having the right mindset, that is that at some level to do this kind of cultural transformation around digital innovation and data-driven culture, this does require leaders that have to embrace inconsistency at some level, right? You have to embrace inconsistency in the sense that your organization simultaneously has to execute your core business that you know very well. And at some level, that's about driving out variation. It's about doing things that you've done even better. At the same time, you need to innovate and you need to experiment in new areas, and that requires more variation. That requires you to accept more risk. That requires you to have a higher willingness to fail and learn. And so those are capabilities, those are systems that are very different, and leaders have to have the right mindset that at some level you need to embrace tension to do both of these things, and you have to find ways to resolve that tension in your organization, recognize it and resolve it. And, the final thing is, I think that, and it's related to leadership, I think you have to recognize and take seriously the need to change, that even if you don't know exactly where you need to go, you do know that you need to change, that technology is moving very, very fast. The world is changing a lot, and that organizations now, I think, have to invest in this general capability of being more adaptive. Because again, going back to the question of, what next in 5 years from now, none of us knows that, but we know it's hard to get organizations to actually move and to respond when they need to. And so it's better to invest in these capabilities to be adaptive now. And I think that's much of what we're driving at.
The first and foremost, and what Dennis said, I agree to that, is to get that strategy. One thing is getting that strategy in place in one or two clear visibility what the strategy is going to be. The challenge now that most companies have is not setting the strategy, aligning the strategy along with all the leaders in the company. So I think that needs to be done. Setting the strategy and aligning all the leaders in the company, speaking and walking the same thought process, the same vision where the company needs to be. And I cannot stress as much as Dennis has said, invest in talent, readiness. Their skills and culture is so important that has to change. You've got to invest. There's one investment they cannot go wrong, right? So that's really important. So while you get the whole company with strategy and every leader is talking and walking the same, tune, the talent, readiness, skills, and culture. And the third part that I think is important to look at is automate tasks. So, and we see that now with current COVID-19, that things that we used to do mundanely now, it's not even necessary anymore, right? And that is important. People, when I talk about it, people worry about job losses when I say automate task. And I'm going, people who decides that we have to work 8 hours a day, right? Who decided then farmers had to work 18 hours a day? And I think in the future should be every one of us would want efficiency, so we have a better quality of life. And we should not think automation as a job loss or a privilege to someone. Because like you say, who knows what will happen in 5 years? And we need people to have the time to innovate, create, self-upgrade, and we need to enable that.
I think that actually Shah hit on this earlier, right? It's not, it's failing to look at this as an investment, right? And looking only at the cost, right? Because at some level you are investing in the future, right? I mean, ultimately you're investing in transformation, you're investing in culture change. These things can have enormous returns, but they do come in the future. And, we need to think about that in terms of investment. And I think, failing to really not have that vision and not treat it as an investment, I think that that's a big obstacle. And I think, be articulating the vision from a leadership standpoint, it's articulating the vision. It is communicating that vision and aligning other people around that vision, and then investing and making it happen. I think that's the challenge. And I think everything that we've been talking about is really around meeting that challenge. But I think, the mindset here around seeing this as an investment in transformation is really the thing that needs to show.
Yeah, that will be the single most, especially now, right? Okay, we have 100% cost, zero revenue. Where do we save money? And that becomes, then this whole transformation can wait. No, it can't. So it has an investment now. Really look like where they spend. And the point is, I think companies need to think what's next after this. This is going to be temporary, but what has succeeded in the past will not work moving forward, because the new norm is going to change everything. And I think agree with Dennis that the whole part about looking at this as an investment, not as a cost factor. And the other part is the talent, the people readiness, not being ready to embrace even the change of digitalization. I mean, look at how many people, even Harvard, right, had to learn how to use Zoom, and you take huge pride in your classroom. You patented your Harvard, classroom, the way you deliver even the hotels. That agility to be able to change quickly only will come if the culture has been already set.
Wow, this is a tough one. I think there's some big, if you go back historically, there's been a lot of really huge technological innovations that have reshaped society, right? I mean, you can go all the way back to agricultural technology and think about the impact this has had. But I think if we are going to be recent, I think you really have to look at digital and in particular, the digitization of many more forms of data coupled with increasing computing power. I actually think if you think about all this talk about AI and machine learning and all this, I've been teaching about analytics in business since I was a doctoral student at Harvard, actually going back to 1998 even. And I can tell you that early on, I would say up until maybe 5 years ago or so, it was actually quite hard to get executives engaged in understanding data-driven decision-making, understanding data, how data could improve organizational performance. Actually, it was hard to get executives really engaged actually in data type of topics. And that changed dramatically, I would say, at least, maybe just a little over 5 years ago. And I think, it's not that the techniques or the promise of data, the techniques to analyze it or the promise of data hasn't been there for a long time. I think what you see now is just much more computing power, many, many, many different forms of data. What people call big data just means there are more and more things that once were not, kind of systematically collected as data are data now, right? And can be used very powerfully. And so I think that, this more digitization of many different forms of data coupled with increased computing power, I think that's the big things that change. It's actually enabled these kinds of machine learning techniques that have been around for a long time actually just be used more effectively and more productively in organizations. And so when, we talk about AI, machine learning and all of that, I think this is really, its prevalence in organizations and the business models it's enabling are really this interesting confluence of increasing computing power with, increasing digitization of data. I think that those are the forces that are really interesting here. We read this over again, right? The AI has been there for the longest, but as in theory, but in practical, there was never enough powerful laptops or systems to hold it. We used to use cards that they will stack up to try to hold the power of data. I think that and a lot of people believe that the AI, if anybody, any company or any country that has an AI strategy in place will be a world leader down the road. AI varies, like you said, right? It varies from, just automating to, taking over the world kind of, theories out there. But I think that technology, if it's expensive in many ways because it's new, not enough talent, there's so many different investments, data is already there, more and more powerful pieces are coming up. But I think if people start embracing that kind of technology, I think that will give them an edge.
But then start small. Start with the whole digitization, data literacy, data-driven organization, and then you will understand how the AI. You must learn to walk before you run, and I think having an AI would be already running. So.
No, I'm going to echo that. You got to walk before you run, because I think it's interesting. Just going back, my experience over the last 20 years or so has been, really hard to get executives interested in, basic ideas around data and analysis and all of that. That's shifted in a big way, but maybe in some sense there's been an overcorrection. I think that, people want to jump ahead to these ideas around AI and so on without really understanding data and analysis at a more fundamental level, actually, before you get there, right? Walk before you run. I actually think that there has been a little bit of an overcorrection and a little over-eagerness, actually, to go there. But nevertheless, we do have to recognize that it is this interest is coming from somewhere, right? People are seeing the power of data out there, are seeing the power and potential of things like AI, are seeing machine learning being applied in many more areas of business, new business models being enabled. And so I think that there is a reason for the interest, but I absolutely echo that idea that, people need to learn to walk before they run here in this space for sure.